An interesting conversation with the EFF's Veronica Mbete. And let's bring it back now to studio. Dr. Mbete, let me come to you just on the back of that. Lotrit represents a madam, and if she's voted in, then the country is gone.
Well, so the racial politics of the DA can't be escaped, and I think that the shift rightwards of the DA that we've seen in the last about 10 years, I think has really shifted a lot of the rhetoric or the perception that the DA could have been a party that was broadly welcoming of the broad majority of South Africa's population. I think it's a shift we saw in the last 5 years perhaps. And so the view of the DA as a white party, we saw one of the international news stations describe it as a white-led pro-business party. You know, that view of the DA, that the party did very little itself to, you know, to change or to condemn, certainly in the run-up to this election, is going to be this albatross, right, around the neck of this coalition, and this view that the ANC, having won majority, liberation for the black majority, is now handing it back to white South Africans, and the issue of race is still a hugely emotive one in this country. We can't escape that. And so that this is going to be a rhetoric that can be used and not without cause, right, against this new coalition, this new governing coalition, I think is just a reality. And we've just seen an example of it, and I think that we're going to continue seeing it. And what we're going to need to see is the extent to which the governing coalition can govern in a way that does not reinforce those ideas, and the way in which the DA changes its own rhetoric, its own approach to politics, now that it's going to need to be governing with the ANC for the interests of the majority. And so, the burning the flag, the rescue South Africa, all of that rhetoric no longer will be able to be used by the DA in its own politics if it wants to be seen as a legitimate partner in this coalition. But of course, it's also going to be very different, as Prof was saying earlier, for the ANC in terms of selling this to its own constituency, because this is the prevalent view amongst a large part of the ANC support base.
Professor Booysen, perhaps to continue with that, the rhetoric of the Democratic Alliance, or perhaps the shift that we've seen to the right in the past 5 years, this has actually worked to their advantage, because they really did move away from the race politics, if you will, because the previous years, where they saw significant losses with Mmusi Maimane at the helm, Helen Zille came out and stated that it's because we toyed around with the politics of identity and it didn't work for us. We lost a great number of our voters to the FF+. And now they were unapologetic in the past 5 years. They were unapologetic and moving somewhat with that rhetoric more to the right. It paid dividends. They saw some sort of an increase in numbers again. So would they really want to move away from that kind of a position which was more right in their policies or being seen as pro-market?
Yes, this is really going to push them. And they're already being pulled and pushed in so many directions. And they certainly would want to reposition, and they can actually use this association with government, if they can show definitively that they can help advance those agendas for empowerment, for job creation, for better health, education, etc., areas on which people on the ground can really feel tangible differences. They could really benefit from that. But then, exactly as Sithembile said, they've got that albatross, and they would have to show all the way that they don't deserve having that. So it is a big challenge to them. And we can see in this last election, yes, I believe they did win votes back from the Freedom Front. There's also evidence that they have extended their support bases in non-white, black in various shades of black to constituencies, not overwhelmingly, but that they did show increases there. So maybe they have found some way to start accessing that kind of vote in better scope than before, but the proof is really still out there.
I'm keen to hear your thoughts further on that point, especially to both of you, as to what have they done to try and get this. But Tammy, let me bring you in, because this segues into a deeper conversation of what we've been seeing taking place in our metros. There's been a lot of, discussion around these arrangements. Others would say we have an arrangement, a voting arrangement. It's not a coalition. Others say that they're in a coalition. But then, at the end of the day, these particular agreements at some point need to create stability. What do they do to ensure that whatever agreements right now that they make in whatever form are actually going to be binding and not see the people of South Africa with the chaos we've witnessed in the metros?
Yeah, I think going back to what I had mentioned earlier, the bottom line is governance is a product of the Constitution, right? So the Constitution prescribes what is allowable and what is not allowable. So, for example, the Constitution is very clear that the government is the executive headed by the president, which implements laws. You have the legislature, which is the assembly, which passes laws headed by the speaker, and then you have the judiciary headed by the chief justice, which makes sure that everyone follows the laws. And whatever function each and every one of those organs of state has gets its authority directly from the Constitution. So nothing outside of that can change that, right? So as much as I said earlier, you can have agreements outside the framework of the Constitution, but the person who has authority to implement and exercise power within the Constitution cannot shell that power simply because there's an agreement that he or she has struck with another entity. So which goes back to what I was saying with the president, that as much as there is this coalition and there is this agreement that has been struck outside the framework of the Constitution, the prerogative still resides with the president to decide who is the executive and who are the ministers are, right? So, the issue here is that no one got outright majority, and it creates this problem, some may call it, but I think it's a positive thing given how our politics had played out in the past. You need some sort of structure to hold everyone accountable, so everyone needs everyone. So in a way, it may well be that because the ANC needed the DA to be able to get the president, that there will be some gives and takes. And it may work in our favor, but sometimes it may not work in our favor. So the proof is yet to be seen how exactly it's going to play out. But ultimately, the point is the Constitution creates the framework, creates the authority, and creates the functionaries, and nothing outside of that can change what the Constitution says.
But you know what, I think, Thamsanqa, a number of these political parties had expressed a desire to have some sort of legal framework that will ensure their stability when it comes to coalitions, but perhaps the appetite wasn't all that much there because they weren't even all that much sure that we would actually enter into the space that we've entered into now of having these coalitions nationally. So in as much as they had the conversations, we saw them having their first session where we had the Deputy President, Paul Mashatile, there as well. The DA also spoke of a 5-point plan just to have some sort of stability in coalitions. It was something that all of them desired, but I suppose now, having seen the electoral outcome, they would see that it's more important now to have some sort of a legislative framework to govern these coalitions so there's some sort of stability.